And welcome to Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, the mobile app, as well as YouTube. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Appreciate everybody tuning in. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. Multiple ways you'd interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. See, the phones are already ringing. And you can also find us on social media, hashtag Giants Chat. He is at Giants WFAN. I am at Lance Medow, one word, last name Medow. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcasts. As we welcome you into the Giants podcast studio, it is presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. So a busy show, a lot to tackle. The Giants preseason officially in the books as they topped the Patriots last night at MetLife Stadium. So we'll provide some takeaways. The Giants also already made a few transactions as now the lead up to cutting down the roster to 53 begins. So let's start there, Paul, and then we'll delve into, once again, observations and takeaways from last night's game. So the Giants literally just posted this on their website. They have released the following 8 players ahead of Tuesday's 53-man roster deadline. They parted ways with 3 wide receivers, 2 linebackers, a corner, and an offensive lineman. So the wide receivers, Jordan Bly, Zach Pascal, Montrell Washington. Linebackers, KJ Cloyd, Deontay Johnson, who was on the roster last year, cornerback O'Donnell Fortune, and then offensive lineman Jason Williams. So we're at 82. Process will continue till they get down to 53. And remember, Tuesday will be an initial 53-man roster. That doesn't mean that everybody that makes the initial will actually be on the first 53 entering week 1. A lot of transactions, a lot of roster moves ahead. As far as these 8 maneuvers, I wouldn't necessarily say anything jumps off the page as surprising. Deontay Johnson had been dealing with a preseason injury, so he was working his way back from there. Montrell Washington certainly showed some flashes, and he's a veteran player as well as Zach Pascal. But as we've been talking about, Paul, and this goes back to the spring, we were discussing, would they keep 6? Would they keep 7 wide receivers? And even under those circumstances, it was going to be very tough for a veteran or a young guy to break through because we already had an idea of who the core was going to be at that position.
I always thought 7 receivers was unrealistic. For me, 6 is even a bit of a stretch. But I will tell you this, and this is why you have to be very careful about what you read and what you listen to and who you believe. Having been at all but one off-season practice, all right, I'm talking about rookie camp, mini camp, OTAs, regular practice sessions. I only missed one the entire off-season. I think same thing for John. I can tell you that Montrell Washington, for the flashes that he showed in the preseason games and for a couple of flashy practices he showed in the last month, when the rest of the writers were here, the practices that they didn't see over the previous 4.5 to 5 months featured a scattering of drop passes. And that's part of the grading system. Let's not kid ourselves.
Sure.
Okay? From the moment these guys stepped onto the field in the spring, whether it was rookie minicamp, OTAs, or veterans minicamp, the coaches were marking down their report cards. And so, to be frank, yes, Montrell Washington showed some flashes and did some good things over the past 3 weeks, all right? And that's when the bulk of the media has seen what they've seen. What they did not see, and I mentioned this a number of times on BBKL, I mentioned him as one of maybe the 4 wide receiver candidates who maybe they might be considering. But he was always going to be low on that list of 4 because of the occasional dropsies that have littered his entire offseason. Now, do they bring him back on the practice squad if they get a chance to? Because he showed some flashes of explosiveness and because he plays some special teams? That could be true. But I never felt as though he had a realistic chance at the 53.
Well, because I go back to conversations also that we had on previous shows here. You do the numbers game. Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson. Jalen Hyatt. Okay, that's 4. If you include Amir Smith-Marset, your return man in that group, which I'd put him under that umbrella. Okay, now we're up to 5, Paul. So you even said there's no guarantee they keep 6. And then 7 would be completely out of the ballpark, especially based on injuries elsewhere. But even if you went into the territory of 6, you could argue little Jordan Humphrey is a candidate, who's another veteran, by the way, on the roster, or one of the young guys that are still in the mix. Gunnar Olszewski is another guy, though. What's the likelihood that they keep 2 return men? That
I know.
Could be tough under the circumstances. So, once again, this could have been a conversation that we were having even before these 8 transactions. And I think when you look at it through that lens, I don't think anything is alarming or stunning based on the names that we saw.
Well, I always felt of the guys who were on the outside of the bubble looking in, it was clear to me during the offseason that Bo Collins had the best chance of cracking the 53. Now, then he missed a preseason game. That's a demerit. Okay? Then he plays on special teams. Well, that's a plus. But then he has 2 drops the other night. 2 plays that, all right, one was a drop, one was a tough catch, but he got both hands on it, and the coaches will tell you, you got to make that play. If you want to stand out and make the team, that's the kind of play you need to produce. So I don't know where Bo Collins sits right this moment, but going into the Patriots game, I thought of the potential, foursome, whether it was Cambry, whether it was Washington,
Juice Wells,
Collins, or Humphrey. I don't even have Juice Wells in that foursome.
I thought you were going through the young guys. That's why.
No, I'm talking about the 4 guys who I thought were on the outside of the bubble. I had Collins as number 1. And the other 3 guys kind of, 2 and 3, almost interchangeable. Probably Humphrey 2, Cambry 3. And I had Washington as 4. And then, depending upon how you wanted to categorize Olszewski, I categorize him as a return guy. But he catches everything they throw at him.
And he made another nice play yesterday.
50 yards on a catch and run. So, if you wanted to categorize him more as a receiver instead of a return guy, which is what I did, and I picked Smith-Marset over him. But if you want to categorize Olszewski as a receiver, he'd either be 2 or 3. If you wanted to make it a 5-man bubble, he would have been 2 or 3. I still would have put Bo Collins as my number 1 guy going into the Patriots game. But then there were 2 plays he didn't make. How much does that hurt him?
Well, and the other thing that I think you need to take into consideration is what's the likelihood that one of these players that we're talking about gets claimed off of waivers? And I think there's a very good chance that at least the undrafted crew, you could bring them back to the practice squad, and they would probably clear waivers. I would say, not to say that they're a lock to be claimed, but there's a better chance in my mind that little Jordan Humphrey or Olszewski gets claimed because they're veterans by another team that maybe is looking to upgrade, as opposed to Cambry, Wells, or Collins, if you were to play the waiver game.
Well, I think the interesting part, and I agree with you, by the way, that sometimes people overlook the odds of a guy getting claimed, because that does factor into a general manager's decision. It has to. He's like, oh, wait a minute. I got 2 guys who it's really, really close, but I really don't think X is going to get claimed. So I think I'll pass him through waivers, and I'm going to keep Y because I think someone's taking him. That does factor into this. I would say I did not believe the phone was too hot and ringing for either Olszewski or Humphrey during the offseason. So I would think you probably could get both of them back if you decided to slice them.
Well, and that's why I said we're playing the hypothetical. I don't think any of them are a true threat to be claimed by another team. I think the Giants, if they cut ties with everybody, they'd have a good chance to bring whoever they would like back to the practice squad. But just based on film that's out there, seniority, versatility, experience, I think Olszewski and Humphrey offer a lot more at this stage of their careers.
Well, they're more proven.
Correct, than some of those other names. So that's what would be going through my mind if I was finalizing, do we keep a sixth or a seventh wide receiver, or can we wind up storing somebody on the practice squad when the waiver process is all said and done? And remember, another thing that will come into play here is injuries coming out of the third preseason game, and that's where I want to go. We have no update right now, but clearly it was really sad to see what happened to TJ Moore at the tail end of last night's game with him being carted off the field. Brian Daboll, when he spoke with the media, just said it wasn't good, but there is no exact layout of what the injury is or what surgeries may need to follow, but he had a pick six, he's had a good camp, and I'm not putting him on an island, but these bumps and bruises, Paul, that pile up towards the latter part of the preseason, beginning of the regular season, also influences how many guys you have to keep at a given position.
No doubt.
Now, TJ Moore wasn't necessarily going to be a starter, but you could say he may have been a backup that they looked at. Do they want to keep somebody else additionally because of the lack of experience or whatever it may be? All of these things add into now this conversation. While it may not be something that is directly connected to wide receiver, as you like to say, it's a spider web, it's the puzzle, and one thing winds up influencing another facet of the roster.
I think of the guys on the outside of the bubble or guys who are hoping to get into it at cornerback. Art Green, for me, was the lead guy to make the 53 coming into last night's game. And quite honestly, I thought he did enough to continue to be the lead guy.
Yeah, he was active around the football.
I mean, there was a series in the second quarter, I believe it was. And let me just look at my game notes. I believe it was the late second quarter, or was it the late first quarter? Late second quarter, where he was in on... let's see, here it is. Let me see. Let me find it one more time here. This is the first quarter. He was in on 3 tackles in a row. Well,
you saw his name in the mix multiple times. So that's why I would say, I think the best way to describe his effort last night, active, had a good read on the football, and I'm sure that stood out to the coaching staff.
Oh, it was about 5 minutes left in the first quarter. The Patriots 1st and 10 at the Giants 40. Hasty on 3 straight runs of 1, 4, and 4. And each time there was a significant closure into the rushing lane by Art Green. Now, whether or not they gave him a tackle or an assisted tackle,
I have him as getting a solo tackle on all 3 of those plays.
Did they give him solos on each one of them?
Yes, they did. And this was the drive that ended with the missed field goal, just so the audience understands, with the Giants leading 7-0.
He filled the hole on 3 consecutive plays. And as I say, I was unaware if the official stat guy gave him tackles on all 3 of them. But, I mean, you could not have asked him to do anything else. I mean, he was, on those 3 plays, he was absolutely perfect. He did exactly what you would want a corner to do. So I get it, right? You're going to say to me, well, he played the run great. Well, you do have to play the run.
No, you do. Well, especially based on this team.
It's part
and
of
the issues they had last season.
It's part of it. And he plays special teams. So Art Green, for me, maintains his nose lead on the rest of the corners in the depth chart.
He finished with 5 tackles total, 4 solo is what the official box score gave him. So he was tied for second on the team behind KJ Cloyd, who had 6 and 2 solo from last night's statistics. As far as some of the other standouts, clearly we saw 3 different quarterbacks play, and Jackson Dart got his first NFL start, at least in a preseason setting. And while some people want to read into the numbers, I'm not one of them, Paul. Statistics are what they are, but remember, there's no game planning. There are limited scenarios and situations, so you have to sort of take a step back. But I think litmus test-wise, what Dart has done over the course of 3 preseason games has shown you that there's comfort, there's command, there's quick thinking, the decision making, all of those things. Like, I look at that as positives as opposed to whether he throws for 100 yards or he has 3 touchdowns and plays clean football. It's about how does he handle the operation of the offense, and is when pressure is around him, is he extending a play? Is he throwing it away? I mean, if there's any critique, it's clearly the play that forced him to get checked out briefly for a concussion, where he tried to maybe squeeze through it, even to his own admittance, through 2 defenders when probably he should have slid a little bit earlier, especially in a preseason game, and take what you can give him. But outside of that, I think overall, he certainly looks as if he's in a comfort zone right now, which is a positive takeaway at this stage of the preseason.
He has checked every box that he could possibly check to this point. Now, as I said on the show the other day, they're playing checkers, and in a couple of weeks, they start to play chess. It is a different game, a much more complicated game. So, at whatever time Jackson Dart winds up getting a chance to play, and again, I firmly believe he should redshirt the season, but at whatever time he gets to play in a regular season game against real NFL competition, it will be another test and another notch on his belt that we will have to grade. Right now, that's an unknown, and that's okay. We can only grade him on what he's done so far, and all of that stuff has been terrific, except for one thing. He obviously does not know how to baseball slide, and that's got to be part of his repertoire before he gets himself into serious trouble. He has been hit by going face first, head first, shoulder first in all 3 of the preseason games.
And last night it led to a turnover, which they were lucky there was a penalty on the play, or else that would have been a loss of possession.
Forced him to go to the tent for 2 minutes to get checked out for a possible concussion. And, I get it, right? Brian Dable says he's got to protect himself. Tommy DeVito, his best friend on the team. Yeah, I told him he's got to slide. Okay, enough already. It's 3 preseason games. You've been hit in all 3 preseason games by taking off with the ball and not sliding. I mean, it's amazing how much he's done to impress us, and yet a simple baseball slide is not part of the resume yet.
I think, and this is not an excuse for him, but this is me reading into it, Paul. I think since he's come to the realization, hey, Russell Wilson is the starter, there's a good chance that I'm not going to see a lot of regular season action this year, if any. You want to sort of make the most, right, of every opportunity. And I'm not saying that this justifies it, but he's looking at this as, for the lack of a better phrase, it's his Super Bowl, right? So as a result, he's going to want to get as much meat off the bone as humanly possible.
Okay.
Now, when you walk that fine line of running into the risk of injury, you have to start to backpedal and say, okay, I understand I may not see a lot of action this season, but do I really want to put myself at risk of also developing bad habits? See, that's what I think needs to register in his head.
No doubt.
Because even though right now it's not meaningful football, when you are, let's say, in a regular season game, and let's say it's week 2, and you got a lot of football ahead of you, and it's the second quarter, and it's a tight game, is it worth, Paul, trying to run through and barrel through 3 defenders, or take the first down and then live to see the continuation of the drive?
When he takes off with the ball, he runs like a halfback.
Yeah, absolutely.
He really does.
And he had a lot of space on the play that he was forced to go to the sideline.
I get it.
There's no doubt about it that he had flexibility. But when they're closing in on you, you say, okay, I'll take the 15 yards. We don't need 19.
There needs to be an understanding that he's a piece of meat and the defenders are sharks. They're coming after him.
Well, and I didn't mean to cut you off here, but here's the other layer of this, Paul. You're going up against guys that are on their hands and knees trying to do everything humanly possible to make an NFL roster. You're going to tell me that when they see a rookie quarterback out there in the deep waters that they're not going to all of a sudden go for the kill? So that's the other facet. Not to say that guys wouldn't play hard who were starters in a regular season game, but you're going up against Patriots backups that are hungry and desperate to put game-changing plays on film, and you're leaving yourself in a precarious spot to get involved in that, that is also a major no-no.
All right. Aside from that quarterback story, I just want to make sure I take a solid minute out of this program to talk about Tommy DeVito.
I'm going to time you.
Who led the Giants to 3 touchdown drives in 4 possessions, all 3 culminating in a touchdown pass. Tommy, to me, who missed out on an opportunity to raise his game to another level when he got in last season, and in all honesty, in my mind, did not make me feel comfortable enough to think that he could be a number 2. And I think that's the reason the Giants signed Jameis Winston, right? They feel Jameis Winston's a legit number 2, and I don't think Tommy DeVito gave them the confidence to think they could possibly go with him as a number 2. I think that narrative maybe needs to be rethought, because what I've seen during this offseason from Tommy DeVito, and specifically now in this month of August during the preseason games, is making me rethink that maybe, you know what? Maybe Tommy DeVito's ceiling isn't as a number 3 in the NFL. Maybe Tommy DeVito's ceiling is as a potential number 2. And I'm not saying he's quite right there at this very second, but he's showing me a lot more upside now than I've ever seen in his career before. And it's his 3rd year in the system. He's mature. He's got everything in his grasp. He understands it all. And I just want to tip my cap to him because he's handled this situation marvelously well. And I think he has improved his stock immeasurably.
There's clearly comfort. You could tell in his command of the offense and how good he feels. He even admitted that in the post-game press conference yesterday about that he knows this offense like the back of his hand, and he has more reps in this scheme than any of the other 3 quarterbacks. But it's a numbers game, and I think maybe the reason why there's a bit of freedom in his play, Paul, is he knew what he was going into this offseason, okay? He's not naive. He understands. They brought in Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, okay? So they upgraded the quarterback room based on what happened last season, and then they wind up drafting Jackson Dart. So if you're Tommy DeVito, even if you feel good about your chances and you say, okay, I've been with Brian Dable, I've been with Mike Kafka, the fact that they brought in all of these new people means they want to, in all likelihood, go in a different direction. So maybe that gave him also a different perspective in his approach, right? I mean, you stand to reason that to me, you could connect the dots and come to the conclusion for. But after we've seen all 4 of these quarterbacks perform, the reality is they're not keeping 4 quarterbacks on the 53. Okay,
They are not.
That's the reality of the circumstance. So somebody is going to have to be let go. And then the question is, if we use Tommy DeVito in this exercise, what is the chance that another team claims Tommy DeVito? I don't know if another team would claim him as a backup. It's possible for teams that are keeping 3 that DeVito would have a chance. It's also possible that he could be weighing, when it's all said and done, a spot on a practice squad elsewhere versus a spot on the Giants practice squad. And I think Tommy offers the Giants more value than another franchise as it stands right now, because DeVito's ahead of the curve in knowing the system. Remember, he goes elsewhere, he's going to have to learn a completely new system all over again. So it's back to square one. But if you're DeVito, and once again, this is all a hypothetical operation that we're going through, you're looking at, realistically, what is my pathway to get on the field in the regular season? And you're seeing Russell Wilson, and you're seeing the emergence of Jackson Dart, and you're seeing Jameis Winston, who signed a 2-year contract, versus if you go elsewhere, even if you're on the practice squad, there may be a more realistic shot to get on the field because of who's ahead of you on the depth chart. And those are conversations that he and his agent will have to have if it gets to that point. But the Giants are in a good position. How many teams can say they have 4 quarterbacks that they literally can have a conversation about? I don't think there's another team right now in the NFL. But the Giants, they wanted to bolster at least the level of competition. I think they clearly accomplished that, but that still doesn't overshadow or put aside the fact that there's just not room for them to retain 4, and there's no guarantee that whoever they do part ways with will even if they pass through waivers, will agree to come back onto the practice squad. So a lot of layers to this conversation.
I think the only other team that could talk about 4 is the Cleveland Browns, and they're dysfunctional.
Well, because of the 2 rookies in Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and they have Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. So that's fair. But both of their rookies were also hurt throughout the preseason, so I don't know if you could say there's as much of a sample size of even a Jackson Dart. But I'm with you. From a numbers game, I'll give you Cleveland.
I think by the end of the year, I think it was early in the offseason, I counted, and I don't remember if I looked at the official rosters at the end of the year or I went through our lads to do a quick check, but I counted, I think, 12 or 13 teams had 3 active quarterbacks on the 53 by the end of the season. So
that's still, I mean, you're talking about half, not even.
Well, we're talking, it was a little less than half at that time. But again, over the course of the last 3 years, it seems like it's going up and up and up. It's starting to creep up into a higher number because teams are more concerned about injuries.
Sure.
So my take, as I've said all along, is that is Tommy DeVito one of the top 10 number 3s in this league? There's no doubt in my mind about that, which is why I think it's for sure that he'll get claimed if he's waived, because to me, and I get the comfort zone, and I agree with you, he's probably more valuable or better off in terms of the system with the Giants than he would be somewhere else. But I just think pure talent-wise that he's definitely a top 10 number 3 in my mind.
Well, you do the math, 96 quarterback positions, right? 32 teams.
Well, if everybody kept 3.
No, but if we operate under that, Tommy DeVito should be one of those top 96 quarterbacks.
I'm going to tell you.
Without any question.
I'll tell you flat out, I think he's one of the top 75. That's how I feel.
I think, to your point, the numbers have risen in terms of teams maybe going in the direction of 3 quarterbacks, but since they expanded the practice squad rules and regulations where you could put established veterans, that has also given teams a feeling, well, we can keep 2 on the 53 and just store the 3rd guy on the practice squad too. So that also has been a game changer where it's not a necessity to, and maybe waste is too strong of a word, but I'll use it in this setting, to waste it on a 3rd quarterback who, let's face it, will never see the light of day under ideal circumstances.
I think that's a strong word to use. I would say they spend a roster spot on a 3rd quarterback as opposed to waste, which kind of implies it's really worthless. I don't think it's worthless.
Well, I mean, once again, I think it depends on who's on your depth chart, but let's put it this way. Paul, in this league, you get to the point where you have to play your 3rd quarterback. I don't care who the 3rd quarterback is. You got problems. Okay? It's not rainbow and sunshine and lollipops.
How deep was Flacco when he led the Browns to the playoffs a couple of years ago?
Yeah, well, Flacco was also brought off the couch.
I know.
Okay, he pulled a Justin Pugh.
You never know.
Yes.
You got to have somebody to throw the rock.
Yeah, but Joe Flacco, though, also a very experienced quarterback who has a Super Bowl victory under his belt.
I'm being a little
really
funny
going
here.
out on a limb. I know. No, I hear you.
Go
All
ahead.
right, let's open up the phone lines. We're also going to get to some YouTube comments. Appreciate everybody tuning in and chiming in on the conversation on multiple fronts. 201-939-4513. Lance Medow, Paul Dottino with you here. Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We got Kevin in North Carolina here on BBKL. What's happening, Kevin? What do you got for us?
Hey, Lance, can you guys hear me?
I hear you loud and clear.
Hi.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hey, I just had 2 quick questions and just a quick point to make.
Sure.
I just wanted to say, I know it's just preseason, but just seeing the guys jumping up and down, celebrating that first touchdown drive, just the energy this team has, it's got us, fans really excited and can't wait for the regular season to start. My 2 quick questions I have is, Trace Ford has been really impressive, especially last night. He had the fumble recovery against the Bills. Do you guys think he's done enough to deserve a roster spot?
Yeah, I think if the Giants decide they are going to keep an extra linebacker, because that's what he's an outside linebacker. I don't get into this whole thing where he's part of the defensive line, edge rusher. We get all the different nomenclatures.
Yeah.
He's an outside linebacker for me. And I think if they're going to keep an extra body there, he's the guy that's won the job. I would think so. But they may have to steal a position because of what he just said a little while ago about some guys who were nicked up. You may need to add another offensive lineman because we don't know about Andrew Thomas. You don't know how healthy. Well, how does Scadaboo feel this morning after playing in that game last night? What if he's sore and not feeling so great? Maybe you decide you got to keep a fourth running back because I think Turbo Miller is on the 53. At least he's on my 53. Let me put it to you that way. So I would say Ford would be the lead candidate if you're going to keep an extra backer. That would be my best answer.
Yeah, I also think that it wouldn't be a threat if they did part ways with him to bring him back on the practice squad. I don't know if necessarily the other 31 teams have him penciled in that they're going to sacrifice a roster spot to claim him. So even if they don't put him on the 53, I could see there being a pathway easily to have him on the practice squad. So, Kevin, they could continue to develop him, and then in the event that they do need him on the 53-man roster, they can call him up.
Right. And then my next question I have, guys, is, Jalen Hyatt had 2 drops, last night. And do you think this kind of puts him into the doghouse, with Dayball? He's had a couple of drops, last season we didn't really see him on the field as much. So do you guys think that this kind of hurt his stock in terms of, getting onto the field, especially early on in the season, or do you think that he'll still get his opportunities when his number is called?
We'll let you go on that question, Kevin, and appreciate the phone call. I don't know if it hurt his chances if you look at what he went through yesterday. And he did bounce back with the touchdown catch from Jameis. But I look at it from the standpoint of, Paul, that this is not an excuse because we were talking about Deontay Johnson. Hyatt has dealt with injuries. Even when he was talking to you after the game last night, he was the first one to admit, it's been a bit of a roller coaster this preseason. He's been in and out of the lineup. It certainly didn't plan to follow that script. I'm not saying that the Giants have much more invested in him than any other young player, but from what I take away, from what I gather, Paul, when you listen to the coaching staff, Brandon Brown, the assistant GM, spoke of him too, there is a bit of patience and faith in Jalen Hyatt. So I wouldn't go so far to say a drop here or there is going to put him that quickly back into the doghouse. He still has some growing pains that he's going to have to fight through. But as far as roster spots, I don't think he's walking that fine line, is where I would put it.
I think his tightrope got a little more wobbly last night, to be honest. He himself was very upset and disappointed with himself.
He sounded like that, yeah.
6 targets, 3 catches. Thank goodness for the touchdown grab, because that makes it a lot better for him than otherwise. But he felt he should have made at least 2 of the other 3 catches that he did not make. And I think the coaching staff feels the same way about it. So here's the problem. He had the best offseason of any Giants offensive player. I'm talking about now from March to June. Okay? Until they left minicamp in the middle of June. He was the Giants' offensive MVP. There is no doubt about that. Russell Wilson never went through a media opportunity without praising Jalen Hyatt. That's how good he was. What happens when we get to August? Has some good practices? Fine. Oh, then all of a sudden now he misses a couple practices. Now he misses a game. Uh-oh. Now what? And then last night, as I said, I thought going in last night, he was in a position to truly solidify his spot. And then he's got, by his own admission, a disappointing game. I think his tightrope is a little wobbly. I do.
See, I would say I think the tightrope is wobbly, to answer the last caller's question regarding maybe role come the regular season and how much leeway he'll have if he doesn't deliver. I don't look at it as wobbly in terms of making the roster. I look at it as a little bit wobbly, meaning once the regular season starts, okay, those have to be plays that are made.
There's
because
no doubt
there's
about
not
that.
going to be any wiggle room to maneuver through those struggles.
Now, the interesting part about this is, all right, I just said to you before, I thought Bo Collins, of the guys next up, would have been at the top of my list.
But he had issues himself.
He had 2 plays he didn't make last night and was 0 for 4 on targets. Now, that also plays into this, I would think. That didn't help Bo Collins' situation. Now, if Collins had caught 4 passes on 4 targets.
We may have something more to
we
talk
might
about.
have, the conversation could have a little more bite to it than it does. But Collins did not seize any job yesterday over Hyatt. At the same time, Olszewski doesn't drop anything. The one thing about this little guy, all right, and I don't mean that disrespectfully at all, he's got the heart the size of Mount Rushmore. He's tougher than nails. He's got flypaper for hands and did it again last night. He catches everything.
And he's elusive.
And little Jordan Humphrey, who, by the way, also has a very good connection with Russell Wilson from their time together in Denver, has also shown to have really good hands, at least since he's gotten here. So that's why I think the tightrope on Hyatt is wobbly. If it were my decision, he'd still be on the 53. I would keep him if it were my call. But I don't get to make the call.
Well, the other way that I'm looking at it, too, is, and that's why I appreciated the Bo Collins comparison, Paul, that you made, because I'm looking at it more of Hyatt becomes threatened if somebody also that runs similar routes and has a similar skill set took advantage of their reps. And I wouldn't go so far to say that somebody's breathing down his neck. I don't look at Humphrey and Olszewski as a Jalen Hyatt-esque player, I guess is what I'm saying.
You know who would be more of that? I think Juice Wells would be a little bit more of a Hyatt-type player. But quite frankly, Juice Wells, to me, was not even in that foursome that we were talking about. You know, I mean, if you want to talk about the body types, right? Olszewski is more like Bly. He's more like Cambry.
Yep.
He's more like Washington. You know, those guys are kind of in the same shoebox in terms of body type and also special teams ability.
Sure.
Right? Cambry's another guy. Flypaper for hands. He's tough. He's got a great motor. He doesn't drop anything. He'll do whatever you ask him to do. You know, to watch guys like Cambry play on a daily basis in practice, you want him in the building. Now, whether or not you value him enough to be on the 53, we could debate that all day, depending upon the competition. I certainly think that's a kind of guy I would want on my practice squad for sure.
Olszewski, by the way, 6 feet tall, just so you know. At least that's what he's listed.
That's what stilts.
Okay. I'm just saying. Well, you called him small or little. So I was like, 6 feet tall? I don't know if I'd classify that, but.
I'm 6'1". He's not.
Well, excuse-moi.
He's not.
Okay. I see. All right. Well, now I know why you're calling him small, because at least based on the tape measurement, you stand an inch taller than Gunnar Olszewski. Let the record say that.
The hands are still flypaper.
I have no issue with that description. Okay. I think that's fitting. As this is Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac, let's head back to the phone lines. Rich is in New Jersey, and he joins us. What's happening, Rich?
Hey, how you doing? First-time caller, long-time Giants fan.
Cool.
Oh, welcome aboard.
What's that?
I said welcome aboard. Yeah. Glad to hear from you.
You basically answered the question that I had brought up, though, but was ready to bring up. But I think we're going to be a good team. I think Dayball and Shane has got this right, and I think they'll be re-signed after this year. I have faith in them. Also, I'm in Eagle land, so I want the Giants to beat the Eagles. And any other team, I want them to beat that team the most. That's all I got to say.
All right, Rich.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Yep, you too. Appreciate the phone call. Well, first they got to get through the first 4 games before they think about the Eagles, because the way the schedule is laid out, they have the Eagles twice in the span of 3 games with the Denver Broncos in between. So that clearly is not going to be a picnic. That's after, though, of course, the 2 divisional games on the road, followed by the Chiefs and the Chargers. Let's head back to the phone lines. We got Jessica in Connecticut here on BBKL. What's happening, Jessica?
Hi, guys. How are you? Can
Hello.
you hear me okay?
We hear you loud and clear. Absolutely.
All right. So I just have a couple comments. One, can I just talk about how are we feeling after this win yesterday? Like, I'm feeling pretty good about this team. I know it's only preseason, but, I mean, this is like a breath of fresh air to be able to throw any quarterback in, and we're scoring in the first 5 minutes. Like, who is this team right now?
Jessica, I'm going to give you one very simple thing that you can put into context, and it's why the Giants have checked so many boxes and have people feeling a lot better about them right now. And it's really simple. Because no matter who's on the field during the course of the preseason, we've seen the Giants fail to execute on numerous occasions over the course of the past decade. What we have seen in these past 3 weeks is a very high level of execution. No matter who they put on the field, the players were doing the right things. They were running the plays correctly. They were functioning. They were producing. The level of execution was really, really good, no matter who was on the field wearing Big Blue. I stress that twice over because that's the one tangible piece of reality that you can chew on. The execution has been good, really good.
Oh, it's been amazing. And just the energy. I felt the energy. It was so different at that game last night. And I was going to ask about the quarterback room because I was like, I don't want to lose anyone. Like, we're playing so well. I know we have a hard schedule, but I'm not letting my hopes get crushed. I just feel like the whole, it's just different. It feels really different. And even Ward, I saw a lot. He reminded me of Barkley. I was like,
no, don't go there. Don't do that.
This is where the excitement may lead to a little hyperbole, Jessica.
Here's what I will say about Jonathan Ward, though.
I'm trying to hold it together, but I'm just like, I feel so excited as a Giants fan. I'm like, who is this team?
Sure, and listen, you have every right to, and we'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. I think, Paul, did you want to add something? I'm sorry.
I was only going to say about Jonathan Ward, he's a good example of a guy who came in basically as a training camp body filler, right? Because Rashawn Baker gets hurt. The rookie
and Scadaboo was
running
hurt
back.
too.
Scadaboo was banged up. Gray's been hurt the whole, training camp.
Yeah.
They were really, really having trouble. Tracy was missing for some of the practices too. They're like, we got to get a running back in here just to run plays during practice. He goes from that to having 2 productive preseason games, especially last night, and you're like, wait a minute. I think this guy's legitimate practice squad material from just being a training camp fill-in because we need somebody to carry the ball. It's amazing how this business works.
Yeah, well, you never know when all of a sudden you're going to be at home and your number is going to be called, not the back of the jersey, but your actual digits, and they're going to want to welcome you in. And it's a matter of whether or not you could take advantage of that. Before I just respond to the last caller, Brian Dable is speaking to the media as we're on this show, and he did just tell reporters that TJ Moore is scheduled to have surgery today or tomorrow. Pierce, did he say anything specific about the injury, or no, he just left it at that? Okay, so we know he's going to undergo surgery, but still don't know the exact classification, but clearly wishing TJ Moore well after he played very well last night, and it's a shame when and how it happened, given it was on a special teams play, which was another facet that he was trying to prove that he can contribute and where he belongs. What I just wanted to add to what Paul had to say with respect to the excitement of the last caller, the execution has been there no matter who's out there. They've been fluid. But I think Brian Dable even touched on this in some of the players. What you have to understand when you're watching preseason football for anybody is no one is game planning at this stage. Okay,
Correct.
Nobody is breaking down film of Jackson Dart, opposing defensive coordinators and their starters, and saying, what are we going to do to slow down his mobility, or what can we do to take advantage of his limited experience? Same thing with Russell Wilson, same thing with Jameis Winston, and it's not ones against ones from start to finish. It's not twos against twos and so forth.
But Lance, the whole point is that we've seen the Giants over the last decade have many of preseason games where they could not execute no matter who was on the field.
No, that's true, but
that's different.
In fairness, though,
that's different.
No, 100%. But Paul, there was also an example that I've brought up where they were playing the Carolina Panthers maybe 2 years ago. Daniel Jones of the first team offense was out there, and the opening drive,
yes,
they looked as if they were unbeatable. And everything was smooth sailing.
Yes, on occasion.
So, we have seen some positives too.
Decade, we haven't seen that.
No, in terms of from start to finish of a preseason game, I'm with you.
Yeah.
This certainly stood alone. But to say that there haven't been positive flashes or good drives or positive developments, that to me is a little misleading.
This isn't flashes, though. This is 3
No,
weeks
this
in a
has
row.
been consistent. There's no doubt about it. But once again, even I think it was Ryan Fitzpatrick who was brought up with Al Michaels on the broadcast last night.
Mm-hmm.
Kirk Herbstreit asked him the question pertaining to Jackson Dart. He goes, what's the difference? Because Fitzpatrick went through this process of playing in the preseason. He was in the league for 17 years, 9 different teams. He said, what's the difference between when you go from your second or third preseason game to week 1 of the regular season? And, I mean, he was basically saying it's at a point where you can't compare the two. It's apples and oranges. It's
like
varsity JV.
Checkers compared to chess.
So,
I get that.
And that comes from a very experienced former NFL quarterback. So
I totally understand
that's
that.
all I'm
it's
bringing.
Another level, but you can't grade them on that test until they take that test.
Without a doubt. That's why I think the way to look at preseason football, and I've said this on the show, you should be cautiously optimistic, is how I put it. There's got to always be the reality of we haven't seen meaningful football
Here's
yet.
my point. If you scored 2,000 on the PSAT and you haven't taken the SAT yet, you're still feeling pretty good about the PSAT score. And you have a right to feel that way.
Absolutely.
And that's where the Giants are today.
Okay, but I'll continue your analogy. And boy, I'm surprised this was not a food analogy. This is now PSAT and SAT. This is a first, people. It is 2:48 p.m. Eastern on August 22nd. My head is exploding because I never thought Paul would go this way. But the colleges do not care how you scored on the PSAT, okay? Because there is no line on the application.
I agree.
It's all about the SAT score.
I agree.
And the SAT, by the way, I don't know if it holds as much weight
but you
if we really move it forward. But anyway, that's a whole other
about
show.
The SAT if you haven't taken it yet.
That's fair.
Okay.
But there's another layer to your analogy.
I get it.
That's all I wanted to say. All right, let's head back to the lines. Lawrence is in Florida joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Lawrence?
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
I'm really
What's on your mind?
excited about this year. I'm more pumped up. But the only thing that makes me a little nervous about, cautiously optimistic, is I remember back in the 70s when they used to have 6 preseason games.
I know.
And the Giants were undefeated in the 6 preseason games.
Yep, I remember.
At the last, they had Marsh White and Gordy Bell running wild against the champion Steelers.
Yep.
Gary Teeter's in a locker room blasting where there's no stopping us now. Then they lost like 7 or 8 games in a row.
I know. I remember it very, very well. And I remember on the bus in Pasadena going to the Super Bowl 21, and there was a father and a son on the bus that was leaving the hotel going to the stadium. And the little boy was asking his father, he didn't understand why I was so jacked up. Okay? Can
you blame the kid? But anyway, go
ahead. I turned to the father and the little boy and I said, you must understand. There was a time when I grew up where the highlight of the season was beating the Pittsburgh Steelers in a preseason game. And then it went all downhill from there. Okay? So I feel you, my friend. I understand. I really do.
I know. But anyway, I want to say about Dart. What really impressed me with Dart was last week against the Jets. When they threw him in there, he didn't know he was going to play. A guy's in his face, and he did a sidearm pass. They still got 25, 30 yards. In the past, that would have been a fumble or a sack or something like that. That's what really impressed me with him. He's quick decisions, and confident, quick decisions. I like that Oseski. He reminds me of, what's his name?
McConkey. Yep.
And I want Catman as a lead blocker to be the next Maurice Carthon. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, Lawrence. All right. Appreciate the phone call. And that was the sidearm throw to Theo Johnson that he was referencing in the Jets game when they planned to throw him into the mix on that play. They took Russ out. They brought him in. And that's another, once again, signal of the comfort and the command that Jackson Dart has shown. The other thing that was interesting coming out of the press conferences last night, Brian Dable had he and Abdul Carter go out to serve as captains for the opening coin toss, and Jackson and Abdul, they really weren't sure what Dable and company wanted to go direction-wise, because Dart said he'd always warm up at Ole Miss because Ole Miss would want the football, and it was funny just to hear them get nervous a little bit, but it was another test that Brian Dable wanted to throw their way to see if they could handle something that may come up during the course of the regular season. You never know. Yeah.
You learn from everything.
Exactly. I want to mix in some YouTube questions.
Yeah, we got some old ones from the other day.
Absolutely.
So we do need to get to those.
Oh, we do need to get.
Well, John had said we had some. John said we had some leftovers.
Okay,
and we should get to them.
I didn't know there was a command that came from the top.
You better get to those.
I know, right? The way that Paul gave that with such conviction.
Mr. Pearson's over there.
I had that on my agenda. I just want you to know.
He's got boxing gloves under his desk.
Listen, I don't mess with Pearson.
I'm in charge now.
There you go. You can see his authority is front and center. All right, speaking of these built up, highly anticipated YouTube questions. This is from Wyatt. Writes, Turbo is a must keep. Our O-line can't run block, but Turbo gets an opening. He's taking off while at Columbia. Yes, I saw that up close and personal. Miller ran a 4.25 second 40-yard dash multiple times. Well, there's a reason why his nickname is Turbo, so I think that goes without saying. And we've seen the speed. We've seen his ability. If you look at the preseason, he does a great job of turning what is maybe a short pass into a larger gain. And this is what has impressed me the most. And I have been following Dante Miller because I call Columbia football. So I've seen it from the early phases of his development all the way through. And Columbia, they utilized him here or there as a receiver, Paul, but it was not a huge component of his game. He was primarily a runner. I mean, you saw the blazing speed, what he could do out in open space. He's come a long way as a receiver. That, I think, has jumped out to me the most. And the fact that he fought his way onto the practice squad last year, was briefly on the 53-man roster. It's hard for me to say that he hasn't done enough to earn a spot on the 53. But again, it's a numbers game. And now that Scadaboo is back, see, if Scadaboo didn't come back, I would have felt, I don't know how you feel, but I would have felt even stronger. No, and I think he's got a very strong shot. But, once again, you just don't know how the injuries are going to play out between now and them finalizing the 53. And that's the only wild card that could perhaps present a tweak. But outside of the main three, I think what Turbo has contributed as a receiver and what he's shown on special teams too. Okay, let's not dismiss that. Those are the two areas of his game that has improved and expanded, and those are the two things that you need to show in order to solidify a roster spot. So the more and more you think about that I think bodes very well for him, regardless of his running ability.
He's also not afraid to get in the way of a blitz.
Yep, in terms of
it's a big deal,
being an extra layer of blocker. Yeah. No, I'm with you. So all of those are check marks. So Wyatt, I'm certainly with you in terms of what you're preaching from that standpoint. Phil asks, do you guys think Fedoni is on the practice squad, the tight end who seems to consistently make plays, especially last night yet again?
Yeah, I know. Look, I'm sure that they want to keep him in the building. He was a 7th-round draft choice. This may come under the theory that you have. And that is, will he get taken if they try to pass him through? That's probably the big question, because when you consider Johnson, Bellinger, and Manhertz, there's no room for a 4th tight end on this roster.
And Dulcich, by the way, is another guy. Let's
I
not
know.
forget. He's made plays.
I've been talking about Dulcich for months.
Yeah.
I don't think there's room for a 4th tight end here. So I think they'd love to probably get Dulcich and Fedoni through. To your point, would either one of them get claimed? Maybe not.
And Dulcich has history with Russell Wilson.
He does.
Going back to Denver. Fedoni, clearly he's got the characteristics, he's got the length, he's got the athleticism. I just wonder. See, Dulcich has been in the league. There's film on Dulcich. So if you're a front office executive, Paul, and you're maneuvering through the preseason games.
His injury history is bad.
Sure, but what I'm saying is, I guess, I don't think teams are watching Dulcich from afar and saying, okay, we've learned something new about him, is my point.
Okay.
That's where I was getting. Fedoni, there's no film. only college.
There's a lot of upside
so
there, too.
you could say you may have learned something, and he's made some splash plays throughout the preseason. So the risk to me when you're doing the comparison of claims, I would say there's a higher risk that Fidone gets claimed more so than Dulcich. That's how I would at least look at it. But once again, you don't have these luxuries on a 53-man roster to keep 4 tight ends, especially not 5. And, I mean, Bellinger, they're trying to preserve him too because of some of the injuries he's dealt with. So I think that it's going to be tough sledding for Dulcich and Fidone to make it on the roster, but it's possible. I mean, as a 7th-round pick, the other way you got to look at it is think about every other team that had a chance to draft Fidone and did not. So maybe that, again, perhaps bodes well that he will make it through and back onto the practice squad. I think that at least perhaps is a positive development. Let's look through some of these other YouTube questions. I want to try to mix in a few on different topics because I know a lot of people have been throwing in similar questions pertaining to the same players. This is from Emily. JMS is better this year, she writes, than last year, though he's still growing. In terms of an observation and a takeaway for John Michael Schmitz.
We talked about this yesterday with John, or 2 days ago. He's up to 320. He's gained weight. He was barely 300 pounds when he came into the league. So he is bigger. He is wider. His power, according to Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, has improved. I don't know until he gets into regular season action if his power quotient is where it needs to be for him to be as effective as the Giants want him to be. I don't know that yet. It's a show me. It's a we'll see.
On the topic of the offensive line, one other player that I think is worth mentioning that we haven't gotten to yet is Evan Neal, who we saw at right guard last night.
Played better the previous game against the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, saw some pressure situations against New England, and he obviously is battling Greg Van Roten. The transition is still a work in progress for Evan Neal, which, once again, is not surprising. He has experience there in college, but college was several years prior. So I think, as it stands right now, it's not a question, Paul, as to whether or not Evan Neal is going to make the 53. I think Greg Van Roten still has a leg up on him for that starting job, based on what we've seen over the course of the 3 preseason games.
Yes.
So I really don't think there's much to debate there. The question is, does Evan Neal's number get called at some point, and how will he perform? Or do they perhaps need him? Here's the other thing to take into consideration. Remember, when it comes to offensive linemen, you need to play multiple positions. Neal gets a check mark there. He has experience at tackle and guard. But let's say there's a hypothetical, Paul, where Greg Van Roten's healthy, but Runyon goes down. Would they move Evan Neal to left guard if that situation arises?
Practiced enough
is
there.
What I'm saying.
They might do it.
They might do it. These things could come up, and
sure,
you have to prepare yourself, I guess is what I'm getting at.
I think right now he would be the first guy up. I do.
Well, especially based on the numbers game, and we mentioned, in case you're just joining us off the top of the show, they did part ways with 8 players. Jason Williams was the lone offensive lineman, and that's a position we haven't tackled much with respect to the numbers game yet over the course of this show. I don't know, Paul, has your philosophy changed in terms of the volume of offensive linemen that you think they're going to keep?
I don't have the medicals on Andrew Thomas. I know that he came back off PUP the other day. We all saw him working with the trainers, working with the rubber bands, doing the sprints.
Yep.
But the trainers are going to have to tell Joe Shane and Brian Dable how confident they feel about him possibly playing opening day against Washington without having taken any snaps. That's going to be an important part of that decision.
Here's the good news, though. The good news is you've got James Hudson and you have Marcus Bowe, who I think has performed admirably during the preseason.
Yes.
And they've given Bowe a lot of work on both sides, Paul.
I think he's been the best offensive lineman through the 3 games.
I'm with you. I also think it's not crazy that, Bowe could be looked at as the swing tackle when it's all said and done this season.
I don't know when he surpasses the experience of a James Hudson, But at some point, based on Bo's start, I don't think you could rule it out.
That's why the way they've handled him, not to get off topic, but all the emphasis throughout the offseason and the preseason has been the development of Jackson Dart. Understandably, that has stolen all the headlines. I think the Giants should be commended for how they've developed Marcus Bo.
It's Carmen Brasillo.
Yeah, but I think it doesn't get talked enough about. And I understand. Listen, 31 other teams and fan bases are not necessarily watching the development of a fifth-round pick from 2025. But here in Giants land, don't dismiss and overlook what they've done to get Bo ready in case injuries or Andrew Thomas is not ready to go right out of the gates. He's pretty much taken advantage of every single rep, whether it's practice or whether it's the games, and I think that has been critical.
Another guy who's checked all the boxes.
So a lot of key decisions coming up over the course of the next few days. It is probably the least favorite time of all front office personnel and coaches, but Tuesday afternoon is the deadline. So leading up to that, they'll now have 29 more roster moves to make, given they are now down to 82 with 8 cuts. But it'll be interesting, and we will be here to break it all down. An important note, starting on Monday, we're going to go back to 12:30 p.m. Eastern start time here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. So as we getting closer to the regular season, normally we have the show a little bit earlier in the afternoon, so prepare accordingly. Set an alarm clock, get a smoke signal ready, whatever you have to do. 12:30 p.m. Eastern, beginning on Monday, we move the show to.
And by the way, the Washington Commanders apparently are dealing Brian Robinson Jr., the running back, to the San Francisco 49ers.
Yep.
That's been, I guess, up on ESPN's crawl for the last hour or so. Why do I bring that up? Well, because the Giants will be in Washington opening day in just a couple of weekends. And so that's one less player the Giants will be facing.
And it was an expected move because he's
He
on
wanted
an
out.
expiring contract. He wanted out. And also, Washington has also brought in some new running backs, too. So I think you look at last season, they actually had one of the best depth charts. Remember, Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNicholas are still on the team with Austin Eckler. And all 3 of those guys were with Brian Robinson last season. So there's a lot of experience within Cliff Kingsbury's scheme on that roster. So that's another reason, and that's why we bring up the numbers game all the time with respect to the Giants. Just one other announcement before we wrap up shop here. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K race and kids run. It's presented by Quest. Sunday, October 26th, 9 a.m. Eastern, MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative T-shirt after the race. Stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. You can register now at giants.com/5K. The Giants Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. All right, that is going to do it for Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Here in the Giants podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. As you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and giants.com/podcasts. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow, signing off here on BBKL. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Monday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Have a good one.